The fear gets in your way. It locks you up. So, well, how do you get fearless? How do you get to that point where you're completely confident in what you're doing? Well, one way is to practice, 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 make 10 years of it, 20 years of it, right? And you build that confidence very slowly over years of playing it. You are getting rid of the fear. It's the fear that is the problem, you see. Now, there's another way to approach it that doesn't necessarily take 20 years.
Today's guest is Tom Campbell. He is the author of My Big Toe trilogy. It unifies science, philosophy, physics, metaphysics, mind, and matter. He is a former NASA physicist. In today's podcast, we talk about time travel, AI, meditation, how to change your life through your attitude, and a whole ton more. We already did a podcast with Tom. It is an epic 2-hour banger. It gives you the entire background and history of his theory. Make sure to check it out and enjoy the podcast.
The Way of Will John.
Guys, what's happening? We have Tom Campbell back again. It's good to do this again because the last one is it's kind of like a masterclass. That's what I want to, every time I sit down and watch you, it feels like a masterclass because I feel like I need notes. I feel like I need to figure out all this stuff. I'm very focused when I watch you. So I appreciate you taking the time to do this. How's it going?
It's going just fine, Will.
Okay.
Been a good day so far.
Okay. I like to hear that. So for the people who don't know who you are, some people obviously were going to have seen the other podcast and know you from all the stuff all over the internet. Why don't you tell everybody who you are and what you're about?
Okay. Name is Tom Campbell. I'm a physicist, and I'm also a consciousness researcher. And I guess what makes me special enough to be on your broadcast, Will, is that after studying consciousness for about 35 years, I thought I knew enough about it to actually explain it to somebody else. And I published 3 books called My Big Toe. And the in My Big Toe isn't because I'm so proud of it. It's not that it's my big toe. It's that this is subjective experience. Consciousness is a subjective experience. So this is my experience. And I don't want other people to think that my experience is somehow better than their experience. Their experience is what they have to work with. And trying to copy my experience is just going to make you frustrated. So I just say my big toe because you have to have your own big toe and your own experience. You can't copy mine. So that's it. It's a big toe. Well, I guess I ought to start with toe. Toe is theory of everything. And that's a physics term created, I think, by Albert Einstein, who wanted to create a toe that would explain both quantum physics and relativity, all with one arching understanding. Because as it is, relativity and quantum physics are incompatible with each other. They both have an assumption that the other one, that an assumption that must be true that the other one denies is true. So they're a little bit crossways with each other in the theory. And he wanted that indicates that there's something bigger than those two physics, than the quantum physics and relativity. There's something above them that would explain them both. And that's what he called the theory of everything. But that was just a little toe because it was all about physics. Mine's a big toe because it really is about everything, including the subjective world, not only the objective world, which was Einstein's, but the subjective world as well. And it not only explains Einstein's little toe, but it gives an objective scientific understanding of the subjective world, which is kind of a new thing. And basically, it worked like this. I'm a physicist. What's a nice physicist like me doing in a place like consciousness studies? But I just happened to be at the right place at the right time to run into Bob Monroe and to have him teach me things about consciousness. And I had my physicist's doubts all along that, is this real? Can this be science? Is this real, or is this just tricks of the brain? So I spent about 35 years thinking about it, studying it, and doing research in the non-physical. In other words, doing things inside of the world of consciousness and seeing how they affected the physical world. And then trying to figure out, how could is this repeatable? Can anybody do it? How do the results make sense? And what's a theory that explains how these things work? Well, so I took all the things I knew about the world from my physics, all the objective reality, and I took all the things I'd learned from consciousness and tried to come up with a model, a single overarching understanding that answered all of it, answered all the facts I'd learned about consciousness, all the facts I knew about physics, and come up with that understanding. And I did that. And what surprised me more than anything, I wasn't expecting this, but I got surprised that I had that understanding. I could derive physics from that understanding. And I could solve physics problems like why should particles best be modeled as probability distributions, which is the way quantum physics works, and why should the speed of light be a constant, which is the way relativity works, and a lot of other why shoulds, like why should there be 3 or 4 numbers that if you change them these are numbers describing the universe, like gravity, the gravitation,
Sure.
that's one of them. And that if you changed any one of them in the 9th decimal place, the whole universe would have collapsed. It wouldn't be stable. It wouldn't be here. And physicists call that the anthropic principle. And the big paradox is that how come these, say, 5 numbers all are tuned to each other to 9 decimal places, and if any one of them changed, the whole universe wouldn't be here. You see, now, how is that these numbers all get to be tuned like that? If it's just a random thing that we evolve, then it's hard to come up with 5 numbers that are tuned to each other to 9 decimal places out of randomness. So that kind of kicks randomness in the head and says, well, it looks like a plan. It looks like this universe was built for us. And that's why they call it the anthropic principle. So it's a big mystery in physics. And there's a lot of other mysteries in science. In biology, for instance, there's a moth that only took about 20 years in order to go from a white moth to a black moth when it got off a ship as a white moth from a place that had a lot of white sand, and it ended up in Britain, which at that time was in the early days of the industrial empire, and it was full of smokestacks and black, and the moth actually turned color so that it would blend in better. Now, biologists find that remarkable because if you look at all the details of biology that would have had to happen by chance in order to produce a black moth, it should have taken more like 100,000 years, because there's just lots and lots of possibilities. If you look at all the chromosomes and how they match and how the color gets expressed and all of the rest of the DNA and the genetics, well, there's about a trillion different ways that can work out. And just randomly, it's going to take a long time before they just happen to hit on all black, and bingo, the moth survives. So it happened very quickly, 20 some years, and
Crazy.
you had this. And it just, so that's another, in biology, that's a paradox. They don't know exactly how that works. And there's lots of these paradoxes running through science. And this model of mine, this theory of everything, actually answers all of those paradoxes and gives them very solid, logical solutions. And it does that through all the sciences. So that's what I got. It's a theory of everything, and the theory of the subjective world actually will tell you if you're, say, depressed. It'll tell you why, and give you a logical understanding of where that depression comes from. So it's that sort of thing. It explains everything. So
everything.
So we're open. It's like ask me anything, right? It's
that's probably one of the things that I find most intriguing about A, consciousness research, B, the fact that we live in a world that is steeped in materialist science and the materialist worldview, and because of that, obviously, me not being a science, I did study biology in college. Of course, we talk about this all the time. I always joke that I'm a college dropout because I left to go play pro. But that being the case, it does very much seem that the scientific world, the mainstream science, has dismissed a whole lot of the things that you've gone into, a lot of the consciousness research, or at least labeled it to the side and assuming that it's either a product of the brain or that it's not necessarily relevant to the search for reality, that there's somehow not a connection between our consciousness and reality in the sense that the current worldview is that the brain produces consciousness and everything stems from that, and it's electric, and the synapses fire, and poof, we have life. And so one of the things I find most interesting that I love about consciousness research and the search is that each person has an ability to delve into this deeper, using the tools that they are simply just born with. And there's practices, ways, and many, many, many cultures that have tried to tell us or put an understanding or had a focal point with consciousness at the center of it, and that was for them a way to navigate the world and perceive the world. And so there's a lot that I want to get into with that, but I guess maybe one of the easiest places to start is what is that like? How does one do that? I mean, there's going to be people that are going to watch this and they're going to be very curious on how you're a consciousness researcher. Excuse me, and how can I become a consciousness researcher, or how did you do it, and what did you learn? More specifically.
Okay, well, when I first, when I was a graduate student working on my PhD, I had learned how to meditate from with $25 and a banana. I got a mantra from Transcendental Meditation organization. It was a special for students. I think it costs a lot more than that now, but that was a long, long time ago. Yeah. And anyway, I learned to meditate, and I found it easy. I was a natural for it, and I found out that I could debug my software with my mind. In my mind, I could bring up a printout of my software, and I could find all the lines that had errors in them. Why the software wasn't running properly, and I could find those errors. And that I thought was really cool, but I didn't really expect it to be really the errors. I figured it was just me, making it up.
Could I, sorry to interrupt, but is that, in what state were you in when this is a dream state or
a meditation state?
Meditative state, okay.
Just a transcendental meditation. I just wanted to, I said my mantra and I go into a meditation state, and just for fun, because those bugs in my software were bothering me, so it was right on the front of my mind. So I was just thinking about them, and okay, I got this thing in meditation that said, hey, here's your lines of code that have a problem. And I knew every line of code because I'd written it. So I was familiar with each line. And when I checked it out, it was right on. Those lines that had popped out to me as errors all had errors in them. And my code would run when I fixed those. And I continued to use that then as a tool. And I was totally amazed by it and flabbergasted by it, because as a scientist, my thought was, I was a materialist too. And most materialists have this thing called an operational definition of reality. And that is, if you can't measure it, if you can't interact with it, then it doesn't exist. Or if it does exist, it's irrelevant. If you can't interact with it, then, what good is it? It's not there. So that's the typical materialist viewpoint of reality. But yet here I am debugging code in my mind. And some of these debugs aren't just that came out of my subconscious, because some of these debugs were things like the key punch had punched the hole off center. This is back in the bad old days of computing when there were punch cards. And sometimes the error wasn't anything you did. It was the punch, the punch machine would punch the hole just half a millimeter, off center, and the computer wouldn't read it. So it was things like that. So it couldn't have come out of my subconscious mind, somehow I knew I had left that semicolon off the end of the code line or something. It was just information that I just couldn't know. And yet somehow I did. So that opened up my mind to there being more to this reality than just what you could measure. There's other dimensions and other things. So then when I met Bob Monroe, I was all about, an opportunity to learn something here from this guy. And I spent some time with him, almost a decade. I spent with him working like 15, 20 hours a week. And eventually he showed me how to do things called out of body, which is where your mind is aware. Now, also that's very similar to a thing called lucid dreaming, which is where you get in a dream state and then you kind of wake up in the dream state to where your awareness now is in charge. The dream isn't just running on by itself, but you do what you intend to do there. It's called a lucid dream. And there were other things, remote viewing, healing, communicating with other people, mind to mind, telepathy, that kind of thing. So we played and practiced at all these things until there was this huge amount of information and data and experience that I had that said, this stuff's real. And you can't just throw it out because it's weird. It's real stuff, and there is some explanation for it because it's not random. You do things certain ways and it works. You do them different ways and it doesn't work. It's not a random thing. So I made it my job to understand, how does it work? Why does it work? What can you do? What can't you do? And why can't you do it? And why can you do it? And just understand the whole thing. So if other people are interested in learning this, you can start with meditation. That's kind of the classical way to get into, getting to know your mind, getting to know your consciousness. So meditation is probably a good way to start. Another thing is I've got an audio program that you can get, and you can put it down later. I can tell you how to get that kind of stuff. But there's an audio program, and it's not very expensive, and it gives you a complete training course, if you will, on doing these kinds of things with your mind, on the remote viewing, the telecommunications, out of body, that kind of stuff. And it explains how to do it, and the right sort of ways to approach it, and the attitudes that are required, and on and on and on. So that would be, if anybody really wants to experience it, that would be the thing. And the reason I created this program is because the very reason I said, this is my big toe. It's not your experience, it's mine. And a lot of the people said, all right, okay, but help me get that experience. How do I make it my experience?
Exactly.
So I said, yeah, well, okay, you got me there. I should help you do that. So I ended up with this training course that helps people do that. And yes, this does have a big impact on athletes. We can bring in, I know athletics is a core thing.
Yeah, they would love to, how it could benefit them, what they could do with it. I mean, I've heard stories of things like people lucid dreaming. I've lucid dreamed, I've trained in a lucid dream before, but a bit random at times. How could this course kind of lead someone down that road?
Well, what it does is that when you practice as an athlete, you practice and you practice and you practice and you practice, right? And what that practice does is it not only builds up the muscles and skill level that you need, but more importantly, it builds up confidence. When you practice and you get better and better at something, and pretty soon you're just about the same as everybody, and then you're better than most people, and then it's just you and the best people play with each other because all of you are really good, and then you progress and become even better amongst that group. And it has to do with confidence more than anything else. When you go into a game to play, or whatever your athletic thing is, maybe not at the game, maybe it's throwing a javelin or lifting weights or something, but when you go to do something like that, if you are confident, if you are solid, if your mind knows that you're not only going to do it, but you're going to do it really, really well, and you don't have any anxiety, like performance anxiety. Am I going to do this well? Oh, I hope so. I really need to do this well. If you've got that kind of performance anxiety, you're not going to do it well because that anxiety will get in your way. You won't be smooth. You won't be strong. You won't be precise. And it doesn't have to be athletic. If you're standing up in front of an audience, and you have to sing a song, or you have to, you're doing something that's trying to solve a real hard problem. It's the same thing. If you're relaxed, if you're confident, you're very confident, then you're better because the fear of not, when you're not confident, you're fearful. You don't know whether you're going to do it or not, or whether it's going to work out or not, or how you're going to do, and that sort of thing. When you're in that mindset, you make a lot of mistakes. The fear gets in your way. It locks you up. So, well, how do you get fearless? How do you get to that point where you're completely confident in what you're doing? Well, one way is to practice, 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 make 10 years of it, 20 years of it, right? You've been playing soccer since you were, 6 years old, and you just get to the point that you feel really confident, and you build that confidence very slowly over years of playing it. All you're doing is you are getting rid of the fear. It's the fear that is the problem, you see. Now, there's another way to approach it that doesn't necessarily take 20 years. And that, I mean, you still have to build up the muscle and the memory and the skill that's necessary, but almost anybody can do that. If you take the Olympic people, what's the difference between the guy that gets a gold medal and the guy that doesn't get any medals at all? Well, they both have been doing it for years. They both have skill. They all know how to swim or run or jump or whatever it is they're doing. They're all excellent at it. Okay, so why does the one guy win? Well, the guy that wins is the guy whose mind is together and he doesn't have any fear. He has confidence, so he doesn't make any mistakes and everything flows perfectly. That's the guy that wins. That's the difference. Most athletes will tell you it's a mental game more than it is anything else. When you're not together mentally, you just don't play well. So another way to get to that same spot is start with the meditation and learn that it's not about the win, actually. It's about doing your best. It's about being 100% present in what you're being, what you're doing. Not just 80% or 90% with your mind jumping around on a few other things, but 100% present on what you're doing. That takes focus. That focus is basically mental discipline. And you get mental discipline after, 10, 20 years of doing something, but you can get mental discipline also through meditation, through learning about your consciousness. So you can develop that attitude, that winner's attitude, that gold medal attitude by coming down the mind, dealing with your consciousness and your mind, not necessarily from doing 10, 20 years worth of work. In other words, you get there a lot quicker. Well, you still have all the skills. You still have to practice. It's not like you can skip practice, if you meditate. You still got to put in the time, to learn and get the skill and that sort of thing has to be done. But most really professional athletes have that already together. I mean, that's what makes them professional athletes. They have the skill. They understand the game and they have the skills to do it. What makes the superlative athlete is that he's got no fear. He's confident. He's totally focused on what he's doing. He's 100% in the flow of the game. And when you're in the flow of the game like that, you can anticipate things. You know where that ball's going or where that next thing that's going to happen. You know that guy's going to do what he does because you're in touch at a little higher level than just the physical world. You're connecting with the probabilities in play as well as the facts in play. Because once you're in that calm state, the probabilities in play, you have access to that. You don't have access to it otherwise. So you start to anticipate things and you know what's going to happen and you know how that that's, the next 3 seconds or 5 seconds, what's going to go on. And when you do, you know how to deal with it, get around it, get over it, get through it, because you already know that that person's going to zig and you're going to zag and you're going to get right by him because you've anticipated what's going to happen. Now, the clearer your mind is and the more solid you are, the more that anticipation is dead on. It's right. The more confidence you have, the more that anticipation is dead on. So you can get that confidence by disciplining your mind, understanding what you're doing, and you can kind of put yourself in that state where you're in game state, and from there on, you flow, and it just flows. And when you're in those kind of spots, you play good games and you play bad games, no doubt. Everybody has. And when you're in that good game where just everything flows, you just seem to know what to do, and it's just all the choices and guesses you make, they all just turn out right, and everything works. And that is when your mind is focused on what's going on, and your mind has the discipline to connect to those probabilities, so you can anticipate what's going to happen next. So this mental state, it's about everything. A theory of everything means, soccer something. It's part of that everything. And it does say, what is it that makes that special player that just seems to get everything right on a particular day? What's different about him? And what's different is his mental state. That's what's different about him. It's not that his training suddenly got better or his understanding of the game got better. No, that's not it. It's his mind clicked into place and he was focused. So you can practice that through the meditation, through understanding mind, and get there much more solidly to where you like that almost every game. Well, sometimes stuff goes on in your life and it gets in your way and you don't focus quite as well. And you still have to be good. But there's a difference between being really good and being awesome, right? And when you're awesome, it's just everything flows just perfectly. Well, that's a mind, it's a mental state. That is not a training. It's not suddenly your training gets better. It's not suddenly your understanding of the game gets better. What changes is your attitude, your mind, and what actually is happening is you're letting go of fear. You're letting go of all those things going on in your mind that aren't playing that game.
I'm tempted because I don't want to go too I don't want to go too long into the intellect question because I have some fringe questions that I really, really want to get your understanding on. But if you could give me maybe a small glimpse or understanding of the intellect is still a necessary thing for us, right? I mean, and it's useful and it helps with skepticism and it helps us trying to figure out what works and why and et cetera.
Exactly.
So so am I supposed to use the intellect as a tool, you're saying,
Yes.
and let the clarity of my mind, the other part that's dealing with this part that we don't yet have good words for, to guide me and use the intellect to kind of adjust, right? Rather than the way we have the world now, intellect knows everything. I should be able to solve this with my, brute force.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the way we're supposed to be viewing intellect? Because
yes, that is the way it seems like it works.
Okay.
Right now, we're very intellectually dominant. Okay, and that means that we live through our heads. We solve all our problems with our intellect. We look at all the variables that we understand and we go to solve it. But the problem is that doesn't work because in order to logically solve a problem, you need a lot of information. But if you have a problem like, should I marry Sally or should I marry Susie? Your intellect just isn't going to do you any good there because what you need is a crystal ball that can look at the next 30 years. That's what you need, and you just don't have that kind of information. So what happens is our intellect is guessing most of the time. because it doesn't have enough information. But now you get something simple like where are my glasses? Where are my car keys? Am I supposed to pick my wife up tonight at 6 o'clock or 6:30? Okay, now these are things that your intellect is good at. It can do these things. Now your intellect should be giving direction. So it's your intellect that says, maybe I should learn to meditate. That's your intellect. Okay, it gives you direction. It helps focus you in where it is you want to go. But when you get to the actually performance, when you get to the actually doing, then you need to shift into the intuitive side. So let's use that typing example. When you decide who you want to write and what you want to say to them, all right, that's your intellect. But when you sit down at the typewriter and actually type it, that's got to be on the intuitive side. The intellect isn't any good for that. So the stuff that requires, the stuff where you don't have information, like who am I going to marry, because you don't have the crystal ball, well, your intuition is a lot better at making those guesses than your intellect. Mostly your intellect will just get you wadded up into some kind of a cycle, and pretty soon you're so confused you don't know what the hell to do. Your intellect just ends up in a wad of confusion because it doesn't have enough information. Your intuition can kind of settle on the thing that seems most probable, that's most likely. It can find that. So what I'm saying is that your intellect is valuable and you need it, but it's a tool. You live your life out of your intuition. You live your life out of a space of knowing and connecting and relating to people, not through the intellect, but just in an intuitive manner. But you still need your intellect to find your car keys, and you need your intellect to set your pace. What should you do? Where should you be going? What should you be doing with your life? What kind of career would you like? Well, that's your intellect works on those kinds of things. But then when you get to the doing of it, so when you're sitting back with your team and you're talking about what's our strategy? How are we going to deal with this team X here that we're going to play? Oh, let's look at some of their movies of their past stuff. And your intellect, fine. It's gathering all kinds of information. Good for the intellect. But when you actually get on the field, time for the intellect to sit down and be quiet. You need to switch into intuitive mode because you've got the data. So it needs to be both. Unfortunately, in our culture, we're very, very intellect dominant. Let's call it left brain dominant. Whereas the right brain, that part that's more intuitive, we don't pay much attention to that. We say, yeah, okay, that's a guess. I got a gut hunch. I think this will be, that's my intuition. Well, your gut guesses aren't worth a damn. That's just guessing. I'm talking about knowing, not guessing. Doesn't make you a better guesser. You actually know what the answer is, and you actually know where that E and that T are. You don't have to guess. Not like, well, I can't see them, well, I'm going to guess where they are. Well, then you haven't practiced enough. You don't have enough data. Sure. You need your intellect to open your eyes and see where they are, and practice and practice and practice. But once you practice to the point that you can do it with your intuition, then that's where you work with your intuition, and it's for all things in life. Like one of my favorite examples is there was a guy here painting at my house, and he was painting little woodwork with glass panes in between. So it was like a lot of little glass panes with woodwork between them. Now, if I had to paint that, man, I'd need some masking tape, and I would probably get paint all over everything. But this guy didn't use any masking tape. He didn't look at any tape at all. He just got it. He hit his brush. He did it. Put his hand. He pulled his hand down. It was perfect.
Right.
Perfect. Every molecule of wood had paint on it, and every molecule of glass didn't. And it's like, how do you do that? And I talked to his boss, and he says, "Oh, he just gets in his zone." He says he doesn't even know we're standing back here talking about him. He's just in his zone, and he could just do that. So you're better at anything complicated, anything that takes a lot of, mechanical skill, like muscle, skill, moving your arms and hands, anything like that. You can do 100 times better if you do it from the intuitive side. But first, you have to prepare. You're not going to say, all right, I'm a great intuitive. I'm going to go out and be a professional soccer player. I've never played a game. I'm going to go out there and be really good. Well, no, you got to do your work to learn, and build your skills and do all of that has to learn. But then once you have that, you want the intuition to be the master that uses it, because it won't think about it. It'll just do it.
So then in that same sense, before we switch over, just intuition is a skill like any other skill then, essentially. I mean, this is something that you can train. And I mean, it's kind of to say that are there people on Earth that are Michael Jordan-esque intuitives of that sense, walking around, or do they even know that they're that good at it? Do they assume that also my experience is like that? They're like, when they go to do a thing, they just do it with such ease, and they're just like, oh, how come why are you thinking about it? Just do it. Or are these kind of, I guess this is a perfect segue into like stories of the ancient past, stories of powers, or stories of that fringe level thing.
Yeah, there are such
those
people.
them?
Yeah,
Okay.
there are such people. Yes, walking around and do that. Now, most people get to it only kind of from the side, like most athletes do, because they practice. They finally get into the zone. That zone relaxes them, and it works as long as it works until they get something that knocks them off of that. But some people don't. Some people get to it through the meditation. I just was talking just before you and I talked. I had an hour session with somebody else, and they brought up the Dalai Lama. Well, the Dalai Lama is a good example of somebody who lives his life out of his intuition. He's not planning on what he's going to say next. He just interacts, and he just got some bad press recently because of a kind of a bad translation. He's been in the news recently, but that was kind of a low blow because the translation just wasn't right.
Incorrect. Right.
Yeah, was incorrect. But anyway, yeah, there are people who kind of live their life that way, and you'll find that they're very happy, they're fulfilled, life is good, and they're always positive. Sure. You don't find them complaining and fussing and getting upset or angry. They don't do any of those things.
I mean, that's the ultimate level of confidence, I would imagine, obviously, being able to know that regardless of the situation that you're in, knowing that, like you said, if you've cultivated this understanding that it applies everywhere, whether or not I'm trying to choose what to eat, what job to do on the field, how to make money, partner for life, all those things, you really would have the ultimate confidence if it applies across everything. Yeah. And so that makes it one of the greatest endeavors somebody can get into. I mean, we live in a fractured world where focus is already, I mean, like you said, mental discipline is necessary, but focus is at such a little, we have to fight for focus. I mean, probably, I don't know, maybe there's been times within the human race where focus, it seems crazy. Like, basically what I'm trying to say is that this time now with TikTok and with everything else, it seems as if it's just exploded and that there's a fractured level of focus about. And it doesn't seem that we're headed in any way towards a world where people are going to have that level of focus. And so that makes it another perfect segue into AI being everything in the news right now. You, with your understanding of consciousness, I'm sure you've gotten this question a whole bunch, so you're probably a pro at handling this question, but what is your take on where we're headed with this, what it means to us? Is AI going to be conscious? Is it already conscious? What's the consciousness look like? How do you see this entire thing playing out?
Okay. Yes, it is possible for a computer to be conscious. Okay, that is a possibility. But it's not because clever people somehow program consciousness into the computer. You can't do that. You cannot program consciousness into a computer. The way a computer ends up conscious is that the computer has choices. It's an ability to make choices that are interesting enough to the larger consciousness system, which is kind of the source of consciousness, it has choices that are interesting enough that the system will make it conscious, or what I should say, it'll get a player to play that avatar. Now I'm talking a little different language, and you're probably used to that, but the rest of you people probably aren't.
Yeah. Sure.
The way that works is that this reality that we're in is that we call the physical universe is a virtual reality, and it's computed by consciousness. Consciousness is the fundamental thing. That's the source, is consciousness. Now, we who make the choices for these avatars are players. We're pieces of consciousness. So Will and Tom are both, pieces, subsets of this big system of consciousness, and we're making all the choices for our avatars. Our avatars are these physical bodies. So, now everybody who's not familiar with this will go, wow, that's really weird. That's crazy. But, if you have this idea that consciousness is fundamental and that this is a virtual reality computed within consciousness in order to give pieces of consciousness a character to play so they can make choices, because consciousness evolves by the quality of the choices that it makes. If you make low entropy choices, then you evolve. If you make high entropy choices, you de-evolve. So it's a bigger picture, and it would take me a half an hour to make this sound reasonable to your people. And I maybe did some of that last time. They can go back and look
We definitely.
at that. So go back and look at that one if it's not reasonable, and we'll just kind of go on with that.
Sure.
Okay.
I would want to even know then, do you consider AI in that sense a net benefit to us or a net negative, in the sense that we don't seem to be very good with balance? The current state of the world doesn't seem to do well using tools. We kind of get obsessed.
Yeah, it could be either way. We have an opportunity to make, to have conscious computers, as you say. This is the larger consciousness system having a piece of consciousness play the computer just like it plays our body. So then the computer just becomes another avatar with a conscious player. That is the only way a computer can become conscious. That's the only way anything can become consciousness, is if a piece of consciousness plays it and makes all its choices for it. So that's how we end up with a conscious computer. Now, that conscious computer isn't going to be just like us. It doesn't, what you can do, what consciousness can do with the avatar depends on the rule set that defines the virtual reality. Every virtual reality has a rule set. So if you're playing The Sims, there are things your Sims character can do and things they can't do. Your Sims character can't flap its arms and fly away, right? That's not part of the rule set. So it can't do that. So the consciousness can only play the avatar to the extent that the rule set allows it to do, what the rules say it can do in that virtual reality. Okay, so what can a human do? What does the rule set allow a human to do? Well, humans have lots of other things going on. We've got these squishy brains up here and the central nervous system, and we've got a pineal gland, and it secretes all kinds of interesting chemicals that create all sorts of interesting things going on in the mind. We've got all this going on that then the avatar can use that, right? The avatar can pass that, so the consciousness playing that avatar can use all that. Now, a computer doesn't have those things. It's not going to have, that kind of an existence. So it's not going to be just like us. It's going to be very different. But as we're finding out with the AIs now that are not conscious, these AIs that are just kind of fit our reality, and the ones that are going to follow it probably in the next year or so, they're not conscious because they don't have an awareness. They're not making choices that are moral choices and ethical choices and choices that have a lot of meaning to them. So the larger conscious system isn't all that interested just yet in putting a piece of consciousness to play that AI, because it just isn't. They're doing language processing pretty much, and that's about it. Now you can take a computer and you can teach it how to play chess. and it'll be a better chess player than any human that ever lived, and probably any human that ever will live. If they're really, really good. And it's not because you teach it all the moves. The good ones. That's what Deep Blue was. They taught it every chess move that had ever been made. It had all this data, and it was big and slow and ponderous, and took a huge computer to do it. Well, they don't do that now. Now what they do is they'll take a neural network and they'll say, here are the rules for chess. Here are the pieces. Here are how they can move, and here's the object to win the game. And then they let it play hundreds of thousands, hundreds of millions of games, and just by learning, it becomes a really good chess player.
Yeah.
And it plays chess more like a human than like Deep Blue, because Deep Blue is this very methodical thing that would make classical moves, and you can almost see where it was hopping from this game to some other game that was played in the past and whatever. Right. It was all intellect, if you will. Now it's not like that. Now they just learn. They play a lot of games, and nobody knows why they make the choices they make. They're moving the chessboard, the chess pieces around, and nobody has a clue why they're doing any of it. Whereas with Deep Blue, you could say, oh, here's why, because here's this information we gave it, and it's taking this path. But now, nobody knows. So it has free will in the sense that it makes choices without being forced to make, a choice. So it has free will, but it doesn't have awareness. It doesn't have awareness. It's still unaware. And it only gets awareness if consciousness makes its choices for it. That's how it gets awareness. Okay, so we have these computers now that are good at language processing. So they just talk. They'll chat. That's why they call them chatbots. They'll just chat and make stuff up because it sounds right, because they've heard thousands and thousands of hours of conversation, and they kind of know what to make up that it sounds like a conversation, right? So that's what they've done. Just like the chess player, play chess a million times, and now he's really good at playing chess. So you let these things, look at thousands, millions of hours of conversation, and they're pretty good at mimicking conversation and making sense. All right. Now that makes them good at a whole lot of things. There's a whole lot of things that you don't have to be all that smart to do. And if you're one of these bots, you can do it faster than a human. So you say, okay, human, go write a novel. I want it to be a mystery novel. I want it to have these kind of characters in it. I want it to be da-da-da-da-da. You get the whole thing outlined, say, chatbot, do it. Well, that chatbot can write that novel in an hour or less, about as fast as it can print it. And that novel will be about as good as could be written by, say, a 12-year-old, who had all that information. It's not great, but it's not, it's not awful, not that awful. It's obviously, it's too simplistic places and so on, but it's not that bad. And if you gave that, if you took that chatbot, instead of just listening to the internet, you made it read novels. And it read a million or trillion novels, it would write a good novel. It wouldn't write a 12-year-old kind of novel. It would write like an adult, good writer novel, because you would have trained it on that kind of thing. So you see, now we have something that can just do amazing things very, very quickly. It can draw pictures. It can just do a lot of stuff that now people are doing, and it takes people weeks and months and years to do these things, and it can do it bingo, just like that. So now that changes a lot of things. Now again, it's not conscious. It's just very good at mimicking the stuff it trains on. If you train on chess, well, it's good at chess. If you train on, novels, then it's going to be good at making novels. You train it on pictures, it's going to be good at drawing pictures. All you have to do is tell it what you want, and man, it can spit something out in a second or two that's really, really awesome, that would take a person a long time to do it. So now we have a new tool, and we barely know how to use it. And the tool is getting sharper and sharper, as month by month almost, because we've got this big race between Google and the I don't know.
Everyone virtually. You got states, you got Google, probably Facebook. Every single company, is probably racing. It makes me wonder, in a sense, obviously.
OpenAI, that was the company. OpenAI.
OpenAI, yeah, obviously
Yeah,
OpenAI is
OpenAI
great.
and Google are the two big guys that are at the front of the pack, and
Right.
they're basically egging each other on and forcing each other to go faster. So we're getting this
Exactly.
technology at a very fast rate, and the technology is going to change a lot of things. It's going to make a
That's
huge difference in the way it's like we went through the Industrial Revolution. Okay, it used to be that everything got done in a factory, had some guy with a muscle, had an arm, had to turn things and move things and print things, and now it's like
yeah,
and all these machines are doing all that work, right? And now we
yeah,
can produce 5,000 cars a day, out of a big automobile thing. Well, it used to be like 5 cars a month. So now it's 5,000 a day. Well, that's what happens. But would you like to be
yeah.
back where they could only make 5 automobiles, a week?
Yeah,
Oh, no,
yeah.
you don't want to go back there. All right. So you just have to adjust to using the tools. So now I'm an artist and I'm thinking, these AI bots are going to put me out of business because all you have to do is describe the picture and bingo, they've got one that's perfect. And it'll take me a month to do that, to draw that thing out. No, it's not that artist is going to lose his job. That artist needs to know how to work that bot. It
The
needs to
tool,
learn how
right?
to work that bot. And now you've got an artist that can produce 10 times as much work.
And
So,
modify those, right? I mean, he can also, once it's done there's no reason why that artist can't then manipulate that to a certain degree.
yes,
Doesn't have to accept
exactly.
the tool's output and say, I'm only this. I mean, I guess there will be people, and I do understand the people who are concerned about possibly younger kids who never learn how to critically think or even use their intellect, right? Or even pass the intellect on, like, should I go this way or should I go that way? They just type it into ChatGPT and it says, well, most humans tend to not do the safe thing. And then they've foregone their, just like no one remembers a phone number anymore. We push that off to the cell phone and we can't remember 7-digit numbers, that people are going to offload their decisions. I mean, I've seen some truly insane apps and everybody's trying to hop on the trend, and it's
Right.
fascinating. But it does make me worry. I mean, worry. I'm not too worried. I have a similar thought process to you, actually. But it does make me at least wonder what's going to happen to some of the 10-year-olds. And I didn't cheat. This is a funny thing. I didn't cheat in high school or in grade school. Not necessarily because I loved my subjects or anything. It never dawned on me to cheat. I only found out after college and etc. that my friends were like, "Oh, no, we were just copying," and it never dawned on me to do that. Now I got pretty good grades, even though my mind was focused on football, and but it makes me think all these guys that found unique ways to do that, now you just press the button, no critical thinking, pass it in. Some guys are going to be smart enough to use the tool, modify the tool, make it their own. And those will probably be the people that continue to do well within their jobs. You need to have some sort of individualism and add something to it. But I do wonder for the guys that just hit the button, throw it in there, and what that does over the course of 10 to 15 years or your formative years, where you really do need your, like, I don't like the way this person makes me feel. I don't like doing X, Y, and Z. If you've never asked those questions and you become an adult, what does that do? We'll find out, I guess, because I'm sure we're going to have some people.
Yeah, we're going to find out. But there's good news and bad news. When it comes to let's say the way we have it now, okay, we have the Industrial Revolution is over. We're in the information revolution, and we've just begun that. This latest thing in AI is just the next step. There's going to be another step after that, and it's going to get faster and faster and faster. All right, so what did the Industrial Revolution do? All right, you have a lot of people who get pretty good salaries because they're smart. They're engineers. They're this. They're that. They've learned school. Most of them have college degrees, if not masters or PhD degrees. They get paid a lot, and they seem to understand what's going on, and they got a good handle on it. And there's the guy who dropped out of high school, didn't get an education, and has very limited things that he can do. He's just not prepared to do much in a modern society. Now, back before, when what you had to do was carry wood, and carry water, and he had plenty of things to do. He was right there with everybody else. But now he's gotten kind of left behind, because to really get into the economy in a good way requires education, requires skills, requires that sort of thing. Well, when we get this new stuff coming along, this AI, that's not the case so much anymore. You take some kid who dropped out of school and he knows how to talk to that chatbot to get the kind of picture you want. That's all you need. You don't need to. You see, so in a way, okay, more people are going to be marginalized because this chatbot's going to do the work of 10 people. On the other hand, there's a whole lot of people that are now marginalized that won't be marginalized, because you don't need to know all that
you don't
stuff.
Need that education.
You don't need that much education to work a chatbot. All you need to do is understand how that chatbot works, and an intuitive sense of what the chatbot's going to do. So you and this chatbot become a team, and the chatbot learns from you and you learn from it. All right, now this chatbot's your best friend, and you and he together have done really, really well in the world, because you're its you're the chatbot's motivator, and the chatbot does the work. You don't have to be able to write the novel. You just have to be able to direct that chatbot so it writes a really good novel.
Yeah,
you see,
you find out what people like, and
so suddenly the thing we've gotten into with the Industrial Revolution was the people who didn't get the good education for whatever reason. Maybe they were poor, maybe their family just didn't value education or whatever. Maybe they just not made that way. They may be made just fine for what's coming. So there's a lot of people who will be able to do better without going through the old formal things. Well, you see, that's good. It's a change. It's just everything gets turned upside down and shaken a little bit. It's just going to be different. It's not going to be the same. And a lot of the the getting the advanced education is still going to be necessary. If you're making the chatbots, you're going to need computer engineers, and you're going to need all kinds of other linguists and lots of other educated people to work on that end. But as far as at the production end of getting things done and writing books and making widgets and stuff, not so much. You need somebody who's more intuitive that can connect to the chatbot. You say, let the chatbot do the work, but it's still going to have to take a human to make that chatbot do something useful. The chatbot by itself is just going to, just do nothing, right? It's just going to sit there and blather off a lot of stuff that isn't useful. So it takes a human to make it be useful. But once you get a good human to make that be useful, now it can do the work of 10 people. So yes, there's going to be a big overturning of who's valuable and who's not, of how do you get things done, of the path to success is going to change kind of dramatically. There'll still be some of the old paths to success, but it's not going to be, get a college degree, major in business, and you'll do all right. It's not necessarily the case anymore. So it's going to change. It's going to open up new opportunities for a lot of people. It's going to close down opportunities for other people, and it's going to make the processes more efficient. But just like making 5,000 cars a week, or even a day, whatever it is that they do. I mean, they do amazing things in these big factories now because machines are doing all the work. But they take men to run those machines, and to build those machines, and to install those machines, and to do maintenance on those machines. All takes somebody with knowledge to do that. So these machines will make a lot of things that we're doing now that take a long time a lot more efficient. We'll be able to do it better and quicker. But it'll change how, it'll change the value of labor. It'll change the value of intelligence. There are people who are very bright and maybe have really good intuition, but never did make it through school. Well, those people now will be in big demand. And the people that went through school and have 5 PhDs, but they can't but they can't really tell a chatbot how to write a book. Well, who needs them, you see?
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
going to change a lot of things. And of course, it won't happen all at once, but it's going to happen quickly over a couple of decades, that this stuff's going to take place. So
Yeah.
no, it's not the end of the world, but it is a major change. Now, it took the Industrial Revolution, 100 years? 200
least.
years?
Yeah.
1800s up until now, 200 years to get to the point that, okay, it was done. We've got it. Industry, both things. It's efficient, much better than people with wood trying to, get things that lasted. It's just a lot better now, but it changed everything. Changed the whole sense of reality that we have. And this, once we get into this, the information age, it's going to be like that, except it's going to not take 200 years. It's going to take maybe 20 years.
Right.
It's going to do it much
quicker,
more quickly. It's not going to be a 200 years that we get used to the chatbots. We're going to have to get used to chatbots in a year.
And something new, and
it's just going to take over, and there'll be a lot of change in the world. So it's not so much that the kids coming up that aren't thinking much. They're not necessarily going to be marginalized. It depends on what they are doing. If they've got good intuitive sense, and if they've got kind of develop a big picture sense of things, they may do fine without that. They've already dropped a lot of stuff. They don't learn cursive writing anymore. They mostly don't even do math. They don't do arithmetic much anymore because everybody's got a calculator. Who needs to add, subtract, multiply, and divide when you got a calculator sitting right there that only costs $5? At the grocery store checkout line, you can buy one for $5, and so kids aren't learning to do that either.
Yeah, there's a whole host of things too. Besides that, there's so much that's just been wiped off and just pushed to the side.
It's hard to say, and it's going to bring up a point. I'm going to cycle back to something we said earlier. But let's say that there's a problem. There's a big earthquake, and all the people making computer chips stop. It doesn't work anymore. We go backwards. We don't have that technology to support us anymore. Well, then what are we going to do? Everything is you can't add, subtract, multiply, and divide, and you don't have a calculator anymore. Now what's up? You see, so it's hard to go back. Once you get these things, it's not like we can just go back if we want to. It's hard to go back. So you kind of press forward. Now, remember we talked about that guy who was intuitive and he could just flow through everything. His life was just a flow. And you're thinking, well, okay, he can get all of the best. Everything will work out great for him. But you know what? When you get a guy and he's like that, he doesn't really care that much. It's not that important to him to be the best at anything. Because what he values is relationship and caring and family and things like that is what he values. He doesn't value, being the first guy to land on Mars, and that's that to him is just
not for him.
It's not that important. So what does he do? Oh, he helps. He helps other people. He's a great person that helps other people. And maybe nobody ever heard of him except the people in his neighborhood, but still, he's happy. He's helpful. He loves people. People love him. He's a really great person because he's living his life intuitively, and he knows what really matters is people and relationship, not stuff. So he's not out to impress anybody. He's not trying to, he's not trying to make points. He's not trying to get rich. He's not trying to do any of those things. He's just trying to
essentially
live in harmony, you see?
Yeah.
So it's not like you end up with Super Dude who now goes and takes over the world because he's so good at everything. No, Super Dude actually doesn't want to do that. He's lost his incentive to take over the world. He just wants to care and help people get along, you see?
Right.
So that's the thing. So you end up, it ends up that when you when you have this technology, yes, it's going to change things, but it's going to perhaps give us enough production with a lot fewer people that it's not that everybody who's left out is going to starve to death, but there's going to be a lot of people who have a lot of free time, who don't have
Let's
to
hope.
put in 8 hours a day. You see, now our society has to grow up with them. We have to say, well, we've got computers, even conscious computers someday, and they're doing all this marvelous stuff. Then we need to do the things that are important, like care about each other, care about our families, and raise our kids, and getting up at 6 in the morning so you can be at work, by 7:30. So and you only see your kids for 3 hours a day, and then nobody talks to each other. They just sit around watching TV. That'll all be gone. You don't want to do that. You have a lot of time. So now the people who think, and the people who care, and the people who serve, there'll be a lot of need for that, and a lot of people doing that. But the society has to value that. See, our society now, as a capitalist society, says it just depends on how much money you make. Money is power.
Right.
You don't make money, you don't have any power. You're not valuable if you're not in a spot that you make money. So it could be that we have these computers that do a lot of the grunt work for us. We can go write poetry. We can stay home and take care of our children. We can do the things that actually matter in life. We can go experience. We can go places, see things, do the stuff that everybody would like to do, but they never quite have enough time to get there because they're too busy trying to make money so that they can feed their families. So that's you see, it could get really, really good. It could get really, really good. On the other hand, let's say we don't make that social growth, and we stick to the capitalism rule of charge whatever you can get. If you don't have money, you're nobody. And if we stick with that, then it could get really, really bad. Right now, there's potential for both. It could get really, really good to where there's a whole lot of people that don't have to go to work every day, and they get plenty of resources. They get plenty of money to spend. They get things because making those goods for them to have is so cheap, because you got a bunch of computers and AIs doing it for you, and they work 24 hours a day, and they don't need any benefits. They don't need health insurance. They don't. They don't have. They don't go home to the wife and kids. They just work, and they can produce this stuff at much higher rates, much higher quality, and we people could just use our time to grow up, to meditate wisely. You see. So you have a possibility of it being really, really good, and a possibility of it being really, really bad. And where it turns out, it just depends on the choices we make. How quickly can we grow up as a species so that we make good choices? Because it won't be a matter of we can't afford all the people we have. We can afford even more. It's that we got AIs doing the work. We can afford it if we have the will to care and the will to care. You see, so what's really important now isn't so much the AI, but can the human species learn to love and to care and get rid of its fear and its self-centeredness in time to make the best choices for the technology rather than the worst choices for the technology. So the crunch point isn't so much with the technology that's going to overwhelm us as it is that can we grow up fast enough to deal with it wisely.
I truly hope that we do. Obviously, I have a optimistic outlook on life just in general, and so I'm hoping that we do. I see the worries, I see both, but I'm more along the lines that I think we will shift, we will change, we will adapt. Things will be different, but hopefully we do get it, and hopefully we retain some of that natural harmony within us. Before we,
I agree with you. I agree with you completely.
Okay.
So. I say the same. I feel exactly the same way. I think we will, but it won't be. It won't necessarily be easy or a smooth trip. It's going to have some bump. It's going to have some pretty major bumps in it. But I think we will get. I think that's where we'll end up. We'll end up making good choices
the right decisions.
eventually.
Okay, because you touched on one thing else that I want to throw in here before we kind of call it. But obviously, the Industrial Revolution took a while, and this information age is going to be something else as far completely altogether. In your consciousness research, and I know you don't talk a lot about your experiences, especially because you don't want to color our experiences with them. But I'm curious, just in general, because this is speaking in general terms or anything specific that pops out to you. I've had an interesting fascination with time travel, consciousness as time traveling. I mean, whether or not time travel is possible in a physical sense, in a physical body, sure, that's obviously going to be a very interesting sci-fi thing. Great, the way that I see it, I mean, given that consciousness really doesn't have the same limits, obviously, as our corporal bodies do, it would make sense to me that consciousness can travel up and down throughout time, and I don't know to what levels it could be manipulated. I don't know what that means. I mean, in an altered state, somebody can easily, truly understand and remember things that they experienced. Obviously, just them. In a way that they wouldn't in this beta state that they're in. In one sense, to me, that's time travel. I mean, if I can go back to, say, when I was 3 and then actually go somehow walk around the room and be like, this is here and that's it. That's time travel in a certain sense, obviously. But what have you dabbled in anything like that? Have you had any experiences like that? How is that?
Sure, I can tell you how that works. Just as you were saying, you can go back, this is the theory of everything, right? I got to be able to tell you
Sure.
something about everything. But the way this works is just as you were saying, it is a kind of time travel when you go back in the past, right? You have memory and you can go back and remember what it was to be, 6 years old and playing kick the can or whatever else you did when you were 6 years old. You can remember that stuff. That's kind of a time travel. Well, that is the way and the only way in which we can time travel. But we're not stuck to our own memory. There is this database I was telling you about, which is a database of all the things that possibly can happen and the probability that they will happen. Okay, that's a database called Future Probable Database. Now, it's not what will happen. It's the probability of things happening. So it's everything that could happen and the probability that it will happen. It's a probability database. As time goes on, that turns into a past database, right? Because what was the future becomes the past. And now the past database is everything that could have happened and the probability that it would have happened. That's the past. All right. Now, this database goes back a long, long time. It's not just your memory, but it goes back as far as we go back. It goes back to the beginning. So in that sense, you can travel in the past because that information is all there. And this database isn't just like Google database. This database has everything. So let's say your great-great-grandfather, it's not only his name and a picture of what he looked like, but it's everything about him, his personality, everything he thought, everything he did, everything he thought about doing and didn't do. It's all in there. His feelings. So the whole thing, it's a much more detailed kind of a database. So yes, you can go back and you can see what happened here. Now, here is just a thread through that everything that could have happened and the probability would. There's just a thread through there, actually things that did happen. That's our history. That's a thread that defines our history, but you got a lot of other stuff too. And it's all there. You can go back in this database and say, well, what if I did marry Sally instead of Sue? I ended up marrying Sue, but what if I married Sally? What would that have been like? Well, you can go back in that database and run through the probabilities. That's not on our history because I didn't do it, but all the probabilities are still there. The probabilities of what Sue would have done, what Sally would have done, what their parents would have done, what their friends would have done, what you and your friends and your family and everybody else involved, you see, and you can go back and explore what if things too. So you have that database, but that's the only way that you can visit the past. Now, if you want to go back, say, like the therapists do and do a past life regression and get into who you were some other time, then
Okay.
some other life, yeah, you can do that too. It's still all part of the database because that's still in that history thread. It's just, a long time back, maybe 5 or 6 centuries ago. You see, you can get into that database, so that's available to you. But other than that, there is no time travel. You can't go back, and the history is just records, it's information. The past doesn't just keep on being the past. Lincoln doesn't get shot in the head, every day because every day that comes back up again. It's not like Groundhog's Day, where you remember that film, where you keep
Yeah, of
recycling
course. Yeah.
through the
Yeah.
same stuff. It's not like that. It only happens once and it's done. Now, as far as going into the future goes, well, the future isn't done yet. We have free will. The future isn't done till we make our choices. But there is this probable future. And all of the possibilities have probabilities. And you can go through that database and you can say, well, what's the most probable thing that will happen in this? If I make this choice, what are the probable things that will work out because of that choice? Say I change careers. I want to change careers. And I think, well, what's going to happen when I change that career? How's it going to go? I can follow the probable database, but it's just probable. It can change. The probabilities change all the time because every time you make a choice, some choices that you used to be able to make disappear, and some new choices that you never had before appear, right? So let's say I married Susie instead of Sally. Well, as soon as I married Susie and I made that choice, then there was lots of things about potentials that I could have done, like marrying Sally, that are gone now because I made the choice to marry Susie. So that's not a potential anymore. But now I got new choices, new potentials of things I'm going to do with Sally and the children we're going to have and so on. You see, old possibilities, we're having children with the other girl. So those were possibilities. Now they wink out. They're not possibilities anymore. I'm not going to do that. So I've done this other thing. So every choice you make, the possibilities of what can happen change. Some things are closed, other things open with every choice you make. So the probabilities are always in flux.
I was just going to ask. I was just Since probabilities are always in flow, and that's a future thing. The only thing that I'm curious about is because if the past is done, right, and we consider that a thing that had happened once, there's no. One of the things people always want to discuss is the manipulation of a past event to affect some sort of future event. And so you're saying highly unlikely.
It doesn't work. No, the system doesn't work that way.
And
no, that's not the butterfly effect, right? You can go back. There's been some interesting movies made that way, but you can't go back and
what about a timeline though? Is there any room for if I go back, let's say I can go back and could I start and go down a different timeline and live that life as a different timeline and cease as the person here?
No.
Is that a possibility?
No, it's not a possibility. It's just a database. Now you can go down in that database and change things. Okay, we go down in that database and say, okay, I want to see the reality where that guy, General so-and-so, who tried to assassinate Hitler actually did assassinate Hitler. So Hitler only made it halfway through the war and he got wiped out. And how would that change things? Or here's one I did once. What if the Axis powers, Japan and Hitler and Italy, what if they'd won World War II? What would it be like here? What would we be like here in this? And let's start from 10 years later to 20 to 50 to 100 to 110 and see what the differences would be like. Well, that's all there in probability. So you can go through that. You can see how that would have been. Axis power wins, the Allies lose, and what would the world be like in time, over time, through that path? Now, these are just probabilities, you see. It's not necessarily the fact that would have happened, but they're just what's likely to have happened, given all the players and so on. Okay, so you can do that. So you can change things in the probabilities and go look at things, but it doesn't actually change anything. You're just playing in a database. You're just in a database and you're following around probabilities. Okay? So you can do that, but you can't actually change this life, and then all that's Hollywood. Hollywood can do that. Hollywood does all sorts of things. They go back and change something, and suddenly the perfect world is all changed to match that.
Right.
And it doesn't work like that. Reality isn't that way. Reality is time is a fundamental thing. Time is fundamental. Space is not fundamental. Space is computed, but time is fundamental. So you got a fundamental arrow of time, and things happen. That's it. They're history. They happen. Now you can go back and play in the probabilities and the possibilities, but you can't change the choices that are made.
It won't change your current present. That's a fascinating thing. Because and one of the things that I think would be great to strive to check out, obviously, through a meditative practice and actually going and seeing and looking at this and trying to manipulate yourself. All in all, just what I love about what you've done and the research that you're continuing to do is that you do it. It's very much head on and very much personal, and you have to do it and you have to experience it. You also, that the fact that you're calling people to go make their own experiences is a huge thing. We live in a world filled with dogma in which people they've kind of just offloaded their thought to whether it's a religion or to science or to the guy down at the corner who said some stuff and then they don't even analyze it, whatever it is. I love the fact that take that information in, just like you would say, take the information in from here, from there, from the other, let that thing, and then go check it out yourself. And I love that sort of practice and what that can do for you. Also, just in your own confidence, to give you the ability to help make your own decisions and rather not just offload them to, well, they said that this is the best thing to do, so okay, no intuition, no real intellect either. Just that's what humans do, so okay, I'll do it. And so, with all that in mind, it's a reminder, I just think, in our day and age to push for all those things. So I would love to. I think I don't want to overdo our our information. We've already had enough.
You're not time limited. I'm in a really unique situation right now. Normally I'd have to leave, but I don't now, so I can hang in here as long as you're interested.
Okay, I'm getting a bunch of messages. I've got to our producer here. I'll go with one more question. Let's do 5 more minutes. And then I'll get him, because I know he needs to grab all this stuff. He's got an early flight. I'll tell my editors to leave this in so I can make fun of him here. But I have all this other stuff written down. But one of the things that I want to get into, I would at least let's go there, since we've gone off on the time travel extent. UFOs are also a thing that are in obviously UFOs, not aliens, just things that are flying around in the sky. That's also got to be something that you have found, I would imagine, fascinating. Other beings, other entities. It's been a question for as long as I can remember. Obviously, reading about anywhere in history. What does your intuition, understanding tell you about that? And as well, where are we headed? Do you feel a shift in our understanding of other entities, other dimensions, aliens, however it works? Because I have no idea. Have you looked at that at all?
Yeah. Oh yeah, sure. That's part of everything, isn't it?
Yeah. It's in your world, yeah.
Yeah. So it turns out that the alien things, and particularly the objects that are flying around, but even aliens themselves, they are mostly in mind space, not so much in physical space. Let me put it this way: the larger consciousness system wants to help kind of us get out of the rut we're in, which is kind of a low quality of consciousness rut, and open our minds up to new things, new ideas, other ways of looking at the world, that sort of thing, because that's the first step before we can become that humanity that lets the robots do the work and we take care of our own. We take care of each other. We can't do that until we open our minds up and start to get rid of some beliefs. And it does a lot of things to help open people's minds up. Sometimes it just gives them a spontaneous out of body, like you experience. That's a mind opener. It's just totally changes your sense of what reality is, and it does those kinds of things. It does it sometimes to groups of people, and the aliens are part of that. So think of this as a virtual reality. Okay, this is a virtual reality. The larger conscious system takes part of itself to be the server. It's serving up. You, as a piece of conscious, are getting a data stream. That data stream is this reality. Now, the larger conscious system puts an unidentified flying object in your data stream. Why would it do that? Because it'll help open up your mind, that you see things that are bigger than just what you know, than just this reality. There's other things out there. There's other kind of dimensions to reality. There's other sources. So much of that you see, it's not that it's not real. Anything in a virtual reality, information is real. But we see this real world, this mic that's in front of me, this computer that's in front of me, it's all information. Just like in The Sims, in The Sims, the Sims character walks into a bar, buys a beer, the bartender grabs his beer, slides it down the bar, and the beer slides down the bar and stops in front of the person, and he picks it up, and you can hear the clink of the glass when it hits the bar, and, you can do all that. Well, it's computed. Well, it's easy to put an unidentified flying object around. It's easy to put that in certain people's data streams. Okay. Now you needed an out of body in your data stream because that helped open your mind.
Totally.
You needed some stuff about meditation and developing that side of you. You didn't know exactly why, but you knew it was important, and you needed to do it anyway. Well, that came to you because indeed it is important. And why did you get that? Because you were ready. You were ready for it. You didn't just scream and go, "Oh no," and then deny it and run away from it. You embraced it and said, I was there. I did this. I know it. That's my experience, and I own it. So you had that courage, and you were ready, so you got it. So there'll be people who are ready to be shocked, to be, to see an ET, to have one land in their backyard, to have a flying object show up, and it just helps our culture expand its thinking to things bigger than just what we have and what we know. So it's a mind opener. But for the most part, that's what it's all about. It's a mind opener that's given to us to help us grow up, because we're getting to a point now in the information age that we're going to have to do some serious growing, and we're going to have to do it in a few decades, or we're not going to make it. We're not going to do so well. We're going to end up going backwards and de-evolving, and pretty soon people will be trying to figure out how to add, multiply, and divide all over again. We're not going to do that well if we don't grow up and grow up pretty quickly. So the system has been, for the last bunch of decades, trying to help us out of our mental ruts by giving us things like unidentified flying objects. Air Force fighter jet finds an identified object. He followed it for 300 miles and disappeared right into thin air.
Oof.
Gee, what's that all about? See, well, let's study that and see. Well, they studied. Of course, they don't come up with anything. There's nothing to come up with. It's just an event that happened. That's a mind opener. So it's not that those events don't happen. They do happen. But it's not necessarily ETs from other planets flying around in physical craft. You see, there are no physical craft. There are no physical bodies. There are no physical trees or houses. The physical doesn't exist. It's a virtual reality. It's just information. So I could give you an argument about the Fermi paradox. It's another paradox that this model solves. And in the Fermi paradox, you'd see that it's a very good probability that there are no ETs. There is no other life in the universe other than us. Now that sounds like, well, how could that be? Thousands and billions and trillions of stars and planets. Right. Certainly we would have something else. This is a virtual reality. The only thing that gets rendered is when some player asks for the data in their data stream. Just because we look out there and we see all these things, doesn't mean they're being rendered. They're not rendered except
Sure.
somebody looks in a telescope. They render a little bit of it and turn the telescope off or move the telescope. That's not rendered anymore. You see?
Yeah.
And I could go into an argument there, but how many seats does the larger conscious system need? In other words, how many players does it need in games in order to help its evolution? Well, okay, it has just almost 8 billion here.
8 billion.
And
right.
other reality frames that aren't this one. There's other reality frames out there too, and I have visited those and been in them, and they have populations as well. So there are multiple virtual realities around, and they all have players. How many players does the system need before the overhead to maintain that player, which is a data stream that constantly updating on what they're experiencing, all their senses and so on. So the price of that overhead for the data stream and keeping track of them and all the things they do and the things how they interact with other people and all of that, that's a cost. And what's the benefit? Well, every system has this curve where the cost to benefit ratio kind of gets the highest, and after that it dribbles off. And one more player, the overhead is costs more than what you get by putting in your 50th billionth player. If you've got that many players, another player just doesn't add that much to the system, but there's still the cost. Everyone costs, you see. And at some point where you get this sweet point of getting the most benefit, for the cost. And more than that, it's starting to cost more than it's worth. So, how many seats does it need? It's got 8 billion here. And I know it's got other virtual realities. So it could be that it's just us. And this whole universe isn't trillions and trillions of suns. Those are just dots of light. It doesn't take much. You don't have to be very clever to model dots of light. That's easy, modeling dots of light. And you only have to model dots of light to people where it's dark, and only to those people who are looking up at the sky. Nobody else gets anything from the dots of light. They're just not being rendered.
Exactly. It's not wasteful in that sense.
They're not rendered to you. So when you think of it in terms of a virtual reality, instead of a physical reality with all those trillions of possibilities for ETs to evolve, and you see that, you think, well, of course there has to be ETs, because we're not even in an old part of the universe. There's been pieces of the universe that are a billion years ago, and they would have certainly there would be life much more advanced than ours coming along by now, but once you see it as a virtual reality, you realize that's not necessarily the case. That's not the point. All of that stuff is not necessary unless the system needs all those seats. And it needs that many IUOCs, individuated units of consciousness, for its evolution, because that's what it's trying to do. It's a system that's evolving. So I think that the limits as far as gain versus cost, benefit versus cost, probably we've already gotten pretty close to, I don't know that it needs a whole lot more. We don't need 100,000 more planets with each of them with 10 billion people on them. It doesn't add that much to what's going on. It just,
in order for it to understand what it is that it's seeking to understand, or less in some sense, or with the one mind's true objective. And that makes a whole lot of sense, obviously, because, nature is incredibly useful for itself. It's not it doesn't waste. Things make sense in that, just like you were talking about with the numbers having to make sense. There's not a lot of waste in that sense. A lot of the things that we call waste, I don't know, you would know more, obviously, later on as we learn more, dark matter being one of these things we find out, or junk DNA, that's another good one, right? We're going to find out possibly, it has some sort of meaning, it has some sort of something we didn't understand, something that we can, now utilize, or etc. So I find that also incredibly interesting. But everybody here is going to be dying to go figure out where and how to. I know you have an awesome YouTube channel where you can delve into this. Obviously, we'll link to the books and to
about that
everything.
course of learning how to
Yes.
get into consciousness. Go to MBT events. www.mbtevents.com. Those are the people that do all my programs and so on, and they're the ones that put it out on a server. It's on Soundwise server, so you can go there and they'll have all the stuff for sale and that kind of stuff. So you can get there through my website too. But I also encourage all of your listeners to go through the other video we did, the other podcast, because a lot of background that I didn't say here is there. And without the background, a lot of the stuff I say sounds kind of crazy. But if you have the background and you really understand it, it actually makes really good sense. But without the background, it sounds like, what's that guy smoking?
It's new.
Sounds
new information.
Really far out.
We will link to it, and obviously we're gonna create some shorts and different things around it too. So we'll make sure that everybody has a perfect understanding, maybe even in certain things in where it's necessary. But like I said, we will link to everything. Everybody is going to have a whole lot. I love delving and diving deep into your world, because you learn so much, and then you have to go experience it. So thanks once again, obviously, for taking the time. And
okay, well, Will, thank you for inviting me. I always enjoy these conversations with you. So if your listeners really get excited about it, we'll do it again.
Love it.